Two guilty verdicts for movie producer Harvey Weinstein. Prosecutors call it a win.
This is the new landscape for survivors of sexual assault in America, I believe.
The defense promises a sequel.
Obviously, he's disappointed, but he's strong, he's mentally tough, and he's going to continue to fight.
Live team coverage from around the courtroom and from our panel of attorneys is straight ahead on tonight's Daily Debrief for Monday, February 24th. Good evening, everybody. Movie producer Harvey Weinstein can add convicted rapist to his credits. Let's break down everything you need to know about today's verdict, starting with the verdict itself. It was guilty for Harvey Weinstein on count 2. That's a criminal sexual act in the first degree involving accuser Mimi Haley. This count carries a minimum 5-year sentence and a maximum 25-year sentence. And it was a guilty verdict on third-degree rape as to accuser Jessica Mann. This count carries a sentence of up to 4 years in a New York State prison. Here's the full list of charges. It was not guilty on the most serious counts. Those are counts 1 and 3, and they could have resulted in a possible life sentence. Count 1 was predatory sexual assault as to accusers Annabella Sciorra and Mimi Haley. Count 3, predatory sexual assault as to accusers Annabella Sciorra and Jessica Mann. The jury worked for about 24 hours last week and 2 hours today for a total of somewhere around 26 hours of deliberations stretched across 5 separate days. Law&Crime's Jesse Weber was inside the courtroom for that verdict. He's in our newsroom right now. Jesse, explain what it looked like when the counts were read one by one.
Absolutely incredible scene, packed with reporters. In all of the weeks that I've been there, I have never seen so many court personnel and officers occupying that room. When the jury foreman stood up and delivered the verdict, he actually hesitated. You did see the jury members look at Harvey Weinstein as they were coming and exiting. The first count that he delivered on the verdict sheet, as you said, was predatory assault and ultimately found not guilty. There was no words, nothing, no sounds in the courtroom, but as soon as he went to the second count and delivered guilty, the defense table looked like they were hit with a truck. Harvey Weinstein looked stunned. There were gaffes in the courtroom. I mean, this was something that was many years in the making. When the verdicts were ultimately all handed out and the defense lost their bid to have their client on house arrest, Mr. Weinstein was remanded into custody. He was actually physically picked up by the court officers and removed from court. He was struggling. Absolutely surreal experience watching this. I mean, that's the best way to describe it. Surreal.
Jesse Weber, who was sitting in the courtroom? Was it accusers? Was it the press? Was it the accusers' attorneys?
There were no accusers in the courtroom. Obviously, Douglas Wigdor, as well as Gloria Allred, who represents several of the accusers, were there in the front row. The rest was just packed with media, more so than I've ever seen it. And again, I want to stress this. Officers on every side of the courtroom. This was an unpredictable event. We didn't know where it was going to go, and most of the officers were surrounding Harvey Weinstein when this verdict was handed down.
My understanding, Jesse, is that Weinstein has been booked now at Rikers Island.
That is right. He is headed to Rikers, where he will await pending sentencing on March 11th. Now, again, the defense did not want this to happen. They advocated for house arrest, citing his physical ailments, back problems, eye problems. We learned that he's taking shots in his eyes to correct potential blindness. They said that he's not a flight risk. He has an ankle monitor. The judge was buying none of it. The judge said, listen, I understand he's got medical issues. I believe that. Remanded back March 11th. And now he is in an environment that is one he has never been a part of, jail.
Jesse Weber keeping an eye on things in the courtroom for us throughout this trial. Thanks again tonight. Manhattan District Attorney Cy Vance reacted to that verdict in the courthouse hallway today.
But by no means am I disappointed with the jury's unanimous statement that Harvey Weinstein is guilty of sexual assault and rape. Well, I think with regard to Jessica Mann, Harvey Weinstein was convicted for rape in the third degree. Ms. Sciorra took great risk and was in substantial pain testifying about what happened to her many years ago. I can't look behind the jury's verdict or how they arrived at that. We have to respect that process. But by no means is it a statement against Ms. Shura or against anything that she said in court. Jurors find a way through to a solution that they believe adequately brings them all together with a unanimous verdict. In terms of the cross-examination, I think we saw cross-examination, the kinds that we've seen for years and years and years. I hope that with this verdict, it will become more obvious that those kinds of attacks on the survivors and victims when they're on the stand, making it seem like it's all their fault, will be realized as legal attacks that just simply are no longer going to work in this day and age, and it's time that lawyers stop using them and continuing the myths that I think the jury verdict busted today.
Outside court, it was a fight between the defense and accuser's attorney Gloria Allred as to who would have the first word.
So you guys are going to have to make a choice because we have to go do some work. So you can either hear from the defense team or you can hear from Gloria.
You're not going to silence me again.
No, I'm silencing you.
Oh, yes,
No,
you
sir.
are.
All right,
Oh,
so
yes,
then you guys
you
aren't
are.
going to hear from us.
Well, really?
Donna.
All right.
Attorney Gloria Allred maintained control of the microphone, calling this verdict a vindication of the women who made sacrifices to secure a conviction.
Mimi sacrificed her right to privacy in the interests of justice. Annabella Shura was a very brave witness on this issue of sexually predatory conduct. Lauren Marie Young was a Molyneux witness, prior bad act witness. She's also one of the two victims in the Los Angeles County criminal case against Harvey Weinstein, which will be prosecuted in Los Angeles very soon. All of my three clients should be considered heroes of the women's movement and the victims' rights movement. These witnesses told their truth under oath, despite what many people felt were unfair attacks on their credibility by Harvey Weinstein's defense lawyers, who attempted to do anything and everything legally possible to challenge the motives of the witnesses and blame them for what the witnesses testified that the defendant Harvey Weinstein did to them. Fortunately, the defense attempts to discredit them were not successful. My clients bravely stood in their truth and refused to be intimidated, bullied, or shamed.
Weinstein's defense team finally did speak off to the side after that spat with Gloria Allred. Attorney Donna Rotuno promised an immediate appeal.
We knew we came in and we were down 35-0 the day that we started this trial. The jurors came in knowing everything that they could know about this case. We couldn't find a juror that ever heard of Harvey Weinstein. There's an appellate process. It will absolutely be appealing. The fight is not over. It is absolutely horrible for me to watch my client be taken into custody. We don't feel good about that at all.
How is he? How's Harvey?
Harvey is very strong. Harvey's unbelievably strong. He's taken like a man. And he knows that we will continue to fight for him. And we know that this is not over. No, Harvey is strong. As I said, obviously he's disappointed, but he's strong, he's mentally tough, and he's going to continue to fight. I thank all of you for starting to become more fair as time went on, and I think that once everybody looked at the evidence, I think it's fairly clear that we were on the right side.
Attorney Doug Wigdor represents other bad acts witness Tara Leigh Wolfe. He also represents several women accusing Weinstein of sexual abuse in civil court.
I think one of the things about today is we will not see Harvey Weinstein come down those steps in his feeble attempt of pretending to be unwell and using a walker, because he is now in custody. He's been remanded. He awaits sentencing in March by Judge Burke. And today is a significant day because he's been held responsible for his actions. But while we can't undo that harm, while he's been convicted, we can't undo the harm that he has caused to so many victims. Today will be some mode of relief for all of the assault survivors who hopefully today can bring about some sense of relief. And so for all of the survivors who participated in this criminal trial, I think Deborah and myself and everyone else who participated in this trial want to thank them. I'm confident that each one of the 6 women who testified convinced this jury to convict 2 separate victims
Four guests are joining us tonight. Let's begin with Joseph Scott Morgan. He's a forensics professor in Alabama. Eklund Mercy is a criminal defense attorney in Atlanta, Georgia. So, Eklund, your reaction to this verdict today?
I have a problem with it because I do not believe that it was done fairly. I had an issue with the prosecution. I had an issue with the media. I had an issue with the expert witness. I had an issue with juror number 11. There's a lot of issues that I've had. So although there is a conviction, I don't think that it was done above board.
So you think there's a shot at an appeal here, but the bottom line, Eklund, is that the verdict at face value just seems to suggest that the jury didn't believe Annabella Sciorra beyond a reasonable doubt, but believed that something happened to the other two witnesses. And findings of fact are for the jury. That's hard to rip up on appeal.
Yeah, but when you have when all the stacks are for the prosecution, it's really hard to have a fair trial. They had the carte blanche of what they wanted. All their motions were granted. A lot, that terrible picture was allowed. It was a lot of things. It was a lot of foolery. I don't think it was above board.
Joseph Scott Morgan, your reaction?
Yeah, I think, Aaron, one of the things that was most concerning to me were these ongoing, media interactions that they were having on the courtroom steps. The most troubling for me was Ms. Allred. I keep getting the impression, or it just kind of kept creeping into my mind, is she acting as a proxy for the prosecution? And I think this goes to a bigger issue. And that issue is this going to have an impact on appeal? This perception. I've never seen anything like it. She's representing victims in a civil matter. This is an ongoing criminal matter. It kind of taints the pool going forward as far as I'm concerned.
Well, this is the way it goes in New York. Let's turn to our attorney seated here in New York with me, Mike Korobanik's Bernarda Villalona. Bernarda, here, this is what I say. When we don't allow cameras into the proceedings, it turns into a zoo out on the steps, and that's what happened here. So this is an argument, in my opinion, for putting a camera in the proceeding. Then we would all be focused on what's happening in the courtroom.
Yes, absolutely. But I think they could have had cameras in the courtroom had the defense consented to have cameras in the courtroom. So I think it was a decision made by the defense. They wanted to control what the media atmosphere would be like by going outside and telling them.
But there are privacy laws in New York that say you cannot, as a matter of statute in New York, aim a camera at a witness in a courtroom. So then it turns into all the characterizations.
Yeah, but it could have at least had the openings and the closing arguments because it has been done before. It was just done recently in Brooklyn with the Peter Liang trial where the openings and the closing arguments were videotaped and shown to the public.
Mike Korobanik, let me jump in, different subject here now. This request for house arrest, I mean, when you're convicted, you want to go back home and then wait for sentencing? I mean, who gets that?
No one. And I was really praying that the judge wouldn't even grant anything. Like we say, we have real lawyers here who deal with these issues every day. Our clients, when convicted of such serious charges, there's not even an argument to be made. They get remanded. So I just wasn't sure, though. Did Gloria Allred photobomb the other civil attorney while he was giving his press conference?
Maybe a little bit. Maybe she did, maybe she didn't. Look, we have a lot more to talk about with more reaction to the conviction of Harvey Weinstein tonight. Celebrity attorney Jose Baez trash talks the Weinstein defense, and Weinstein's publicist has words in our own studios. That is all coming up after the break. More reaction tonight to the conviction of Harvey Weinstein on 2 of the 5 counts he faced. Harvey Weinstein spokesperson and friend spoke to the Law&Crime Network about his side of what happened during the spat after court today and about how Weinstein is doing right now.
Very well the way the press really wanted. They wanted to hear from our side. So if I were Gloria, maybe step aside and she can continue taking the press later on. And she didn't want to, and we're not going to stand there. And as soon as we walked away, all the press followed us and left her alone speaking. While we weren't at the podium anymore, we had the press conference off to the side. And she was front and center the entire time. So to say that, and on top of her witnesses, some of her clients are witnesses, to say that she's not a mouthpiece or a surrogate for the prosecution, it's a little disingenuous. I spoke to him before he got shuttled off to the tombs. He's sad. He's extremely disappointed. As he said, he thinks, obviously the prosecution did what they set out to do. And he's a little surprised at the verdict himself. And he knows that we have an appeal, and we're going to be fighting this. Physically, he has ailments, and they're hurting him. You could see him every day of the trial getting worse and worse. Headstrong. He's very headstrong. He knows what he has to do to live. He knows what he has to do to survive. He knows what he has to do to make it. So in his head, he's very strong, strong-willed.
Attorney Jose Baez used to represent Harvey Weinstein. He spoke to the Law and Crime Network earlier today and said the defense lost this case in jury selection.
It's my understanding that Donna Rotuno did the first round of jury selection, which I'm shocked because she's from Illinois, and Illinois, they do not have attorney-conducted voir dire. It's also my understanding that, so obviously she didn't have very much experience in this area. And for this to be your first case, or for you to get your experience on this case, that's baffling to me, given the nature and the extent of publicity that this case received. On top of that, you're dealing with folks that are outside of your state. And on top of that, you've never really done this before. That's a recipe for disaster. And I can only assume that this goes back to the big misconception that Harvey needed a female lawyer. I think you need the best lawyer for the job, not the best, I guess, gender for the job. I don't think it's a gender-related occupation.
Law and Crime Network host Linda Kenny Bodden, for a time, was consulting on the Weinstein case. She's in the newsroom right now. Linda, we know the verdict now. We know that you may have had a chance to weigh in a little bit on this, but looking at the case as it went, do you think it went the way it should have?
Well, Aaron, having been in the case and having a certain amount of a concentration, my recommendation would have been, had I taken this case further in the courtroom with the trial team, that they focus a lot initially on the set-off witnesses. That's the psychiatrist, Barbara Ziv, because she testified in Cosby, so you had to know that it was coming. In New York, you can't put that expert on the stand because you have to have a victim on the stand before you can use the buttressing testimony. So it's a little different than it is in Pennsylvania. But she got a free ride to say that, or suggest that in almost in every case, that there is a, shall we say, continued relationship on with your rapist. Now, we all know women who have continued relationships, but we also know women who have been raped. I have a cousin who was raped, who do not have a continuing relationship. So they had to set those parameters as to what fashions it, and whether or not you can have a sexual relationship even if there's an unequal balance of power. And I don't think those parameters were set.
How much was Harvey Weinstein really steering the ship in this case, and how much were the attorneys steering the ship?
Well, I can't talk to you about what Harvey did or did not do. My contacts with him were very cordial, were very professional. I had my things to do, shall we say, from dealing with Jose Baez and Ron Sullivan. And everybody knows what I do. They know I deal with experts. They know I deal with global issues dealing with women in the courtroom. They know I deal with jury selection. So I don't think that Harvey and I had to have that kind of contact.
Linda Kenny Bodden in the newsroom for us tonight. Let's head to the rest of our panelists here one last time, starting with Eklund Mercy and Joseph Scott Morgan. Joseph, all eyes now turn to sentencing, but we got to also talk about this. Dr. Ziv, the key witness, was apparently injured in a car accident today.
Yeah, cue everybody putting on their tinfoil hats at this point, Tom, because it's on the way. I can guarantee it, Aaron. Conspiracy theories will be rife out there. This woman was struck by a vehicle, and she's in pretty bad shape, from what I understand. Multiple injuries.
Key witness in this case and in the Bill Cosby case. So, Eklund Mercy, turning to the appeal here after the sentencing happens, you think that the defense has a shot?
I do. I think that they have a strong shot, especially with juror number 11, and her interest in there, and how you can even argue it may even rise to ineffective because you had such a juror that was so adverse to your client. So I do think they have a good shot at appeal.
This, of course, is the juror who was writing book reviews about basically this exact sort of case, not this precise case, but a case similar to this case, Eklund. It was book reviews and a novel of her own about predatory relationships, basically.
Absolutely. And what else can boost book sales but a conviction of Harvey Weinstein? She had an interest, like she had a stake in this. And I think that that's an appealable issue, and I think it can win.
Eklund Mercy with a possible insight, possible look at what may be coming when this promised appeal is filed. Let's turn in-house here. Sentencing range. Bernarda, you practice in New York. The minimum here is 5. The maximum, I think, is 25. Let's pop the graphic up one more time. Been saying it all day, but I need the reminder now in this final hour. Where is the judge going to go with this?
Well, it's going to be interesting as to what the judge is going to do, because obviously he knows all eyes are on him. So in regards to the Criminal Sexual Act, of course, is the minimum 5, the maximum 25. And then you have the rape in the 3rd degree, where the minimum could even be probation. It's not necessarily that you need jail time because it's an nonviolent felony. And both sentences can run consecutively, or they can run concurrent at the same time. But I think what's going to play a huge role here during the sentencing is that the victims are entitled to a victim impact statement. So you will hear from Jessica Mann again. You will hear from Mimi Haley again, because the judge and them as victims, they're entitled by law to make a statement during the time of sentencing. So the judge is going to have a lot in his hands. He's going to take into account Harvey Weinstein's probably his age, his background, sending a message, and the safety of the community.
How do you mitigate that, Mike, if you're the defense?
It's going to be very difficult, because the judge is going to take into consideration, even though Annabella was not found to be beyond a reasonable doubt, he could still take that into consideration. I think it's going to be, like the rest of this case, very interesting and very cutting edge.
Bernarda, one question on my mind is just how many accusers can we get on the stand to give victim impact statements? Is this going to turn into another Larry Nassar situation where there are dozens upon dozens?
Well, the judge has discretion as to limiting the amount of people that can make a statement. Obviously, for sure, the victims that are named in the indictment that the jurors found Harvey Weinstein guilty on, Jessica Mann and also Mimi Haley, they are entitled by law to actually testify. It's up to the discretion of the judge whether he wants to hear from these other victims.
Phenomenal discussion tonight here on The Debrief. We continue to watch the situation with the Weinstein courtroom. Sentencing coming up March 11th. Again, we will be watching that, and a verdict in the Jerry Burns cold case out of Iowa. We are watching that for you as well. A full recap of that prosecution on tomorrow's Debrief. We'll see you then.